Hello, everyone. Here is Tatiana Bazzichelli, the director of the Disruption Network Lab, and I'm very happy to welcome everyone to our 36th conference, Techno-Violence, Confronting Systematic Injustice. This is our second day of the conference, and we are connected from the Kunstquartier Bethanien in Berlin, and at the same time, we are also connected on streaming. So I want to thank the people that are online as well and welcome them here. And I want to start by saying that first, I want to mention our motto of today, that is, when technologies serve power, community fight back. And this is what we are trying to do these 2 days, trying to, from one side, to understand what is techno-violence, and from the other side, to bring together whistleblowers, artists, journalists, and technologists together to expose this form of powers. And today, and also yesterday, we spoke about war, surveillance, migration management, and state oppression, and how this is targeting vulnerable community. Today, we also speak about the role of AI, and at the same time, also how algorithms are not always serving us for good, but also are becoming a system of oppression. And how all technology sometimes fuel global injustice. But I think it's also important to say that what we try to do these days is to reflect on resistance and how this resistance is possible by connecting different people that are doing, for example, investigating practices, they are doing art, they are doing human rights projects, they are focusing on evidence and also accountability. So today we start first with a panel that will trace the systemic and extractive logic of big tech across borders, and also how today digital infrastructure are weaponized against vulnerable communities. So it will be a great panel that also is involving, I would say, all women, and sometimes we don't notice that, but we also have this kind of perspective at the Disruption Network Lab, especially for technology and forms of power criticism. So you will see the great projects that they will all bring here. And then we will have a keynote with Terry Albury, that is a former FBI counterterrorism agent, and he speaks for the first time outside US here, so we are also very touched by this. He will be in dialogue with Lindsay Billing, that is an investigative journalist that is covering a lot Afghanistan and Iraq, and also is somebody that always tries to make the voice of the people heard. So we will also discuss of the importance of whistleblowing that is coming from the ground. That is why it's also connected with the idea of the grassroots community that is maybe not technically whistleblowing, but is still helping whistleblowers. The idea that is the community, that is us, that are also contributing to expose the truths and especially put evidence on forms of power. And first of all, also I want to thank our funders. The Hauptstadt Kulturfonds, that is the Capital Culture Fund, the Riva and David Logan Foundation. We are also part of New Perspective for Action, a project by Reimagine Europe, co-funded by the European Union. And also I want to thank Luminate, that has been funding now since October the project of the Disruption Network Institute, in which we work with whistleblower artists and investigative journalists to expose the consequence of AI on warfare. And I will also speak later, closing the day, about this. Then also I want to thank our partner venues, our cooperation partners and our media partners, and of course our audience and our great speakers that are all here. And I want to remind the audience that we are online on streaming. And for the people that are following on streaming, you can connect directly on our website through a chat to ask questions to our speakers. So if you are watching on YouTube, you can go on our website of the conference and each panel, each session will have the possibility for the people online to ask questions that then Christine will bring to our panelists. And also, I want to especially thank the streaming partner Boiling Head Media, and say again also today for the people that were not here yesterday, that we have also some hearing aids. That means they are headphones that you can ask at the cash desk, especially for the people that are sitting in the rows on the back. Sometimes there is some echo in this room, and if you will have these hearing aids, you have less echo. So if there is some disturbance for you, feel free to go get them. And also, I would tell the people that the first rows are much better in terms of acoustics, so if you experience any problem, you are welcome also to come a bit closer. That is always very nice. And so now I want to start introducing the panel and especially the moderator. The panel has the title Exploited, Extracted and Erased, the Global Logic of Big Tech. And so I'm very happy to call here on stage Neil Uzun that will moderate the panel, and I will introduce her properly. You can also make an applause. Thank you, Neil. It's very happy to have you here. I'm very happy to have you here, and also I'm looking forward to your moderation. Neil Uzun is a postdoctoral research associate with the Chair of Technology and Diversity at the Institute of Sociology, RWTH Aachen University. She holds degrees in economics, cultural studies, and social anthropology, and earned her PhD in sociology from Rutgers University. She has conducted research on the global politics of knowledge, science, and technology, including studies in Argentina and Turkey on the representation of the Middle East, in brackets, we would say, because we know also the correct definition is the SWANA region, and the geopolitics of computing speeds. Our current project, FairComp, examines international initiatives mobilizing against militarization of computational technology, including algorithm and algorithmic warfare, autonomous weapons, and military AI. So I have to say that you are really the perfect moderator for this panel, because you will see actually many things I just mentioned of your profile. You will be able to connect the dots, I'm sure. And thank you, and welcome also the speakers.
Thank you, Tatiana, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Neil, and I have the privilege of moderating this panel with our speakers, Rima, Sarah, Leah, and Safa, whom I invite to stage with me. So we would all agree that technologies are never neutral. They are not some kind of objective machines. They are not some kind of disinterested mathematical models, but they are embedded in the heteropatriarchal, colonial, capitalist systems of extraction, exploitation, and erasure. And as the core engine of the system, violence structures the relationship between technology and power. And technologies become sites where violence is operationalized, programmed, and monetized, which sustains and reproduces the system in return. But technoviolence is not an abstraction. It's not just an idea, it's not just a metaphor. It's embodied experience, and it's material, and it's everywhere. and we know that. It's in the occupation and genocide in Palestine. It's in the deepening militarization of Europe. It's in the everyday violence of borders, in the repression of protests, and in the targeting of marginalized groups, and in the ecological destruction of extractive industries. And these events are not separate. They are not sealed off from one another, but they are linked through the global circuits of power and profit. And we see that all around us. Military simulations become entertainment, border surveillance becomes city policing, wartime AI becomes consumer technology. And it's also in that context that it's no surprise that there is an ever stronger insistence on the strategic distinction between us here and them elsewhere, with this abstract idea of a distance. Because this distinction absolves us. It promises us innocence. It promises us absolution from all the violences are being committed everywhere, as if they are disconnected from one another. But this conference takes these connections very seriously. It forces us to look at different contexts. It forces us to look at different sites where these connections unfold, where they become visible. Techno-Violence, Confronting Systemic Injustice, the speakers, they reveal the multiple layers of the system across wars, borders, and industries and cities. And these speakers and the conference shows us how violence is normalized and injustices are orchestrated within the very logic that binds technology and power together. But this conference and the voices we will hear today in this panel are not only concerned with exposing these injustices. They also draw our attention to mobilization that confront them, to the resistance, to the acts of resistance, creativity, and solidarity that emerges in the midst of these sites of techno-violence. And from here, our panel turns to big tech at the very core, the very center of the system, and its operations of exploitation, extraction, and erasure. Our speakers together, they trace how these operations span the entire chain of digital life, from the mining of resources, to the workers who manufacture devices, to those who code, implement, and operate them, and to the marketing campaigns that sell them, and to the corporations that reap off the benefits. And ultimately, to the people whose lives are becoming more and more precarious under these operations. And they will show us how big tech thrives on control, on the power to decide whose voices are being heard and whose lives are deemed worthy of living. They will show us that violence is woven into every step of these processes. And crucially, I highlight crucially, that this is not an aberration, that this is not a glitch, that this is not a malfunction, but it is by design. The heteropatriarchal, colonial, capitalist system and the global logic of big tech work us by making us believe that there is no hope, by making us believe that there is no alternative. But hope is not naive. It's strategic. It's the ability to collectively imagine a future, and it's the fuel to make that futures into shared realities. So on that note, we will now begin with our talks, where each of our panelists will open a different window into these constellations of power and possibility. Our first speaker is Rima Sghaier with her talk, Targeted by Design, Techno-Violence, Xenophobia, and Algorithmic Injustice in SWANA. Rima is a feminist activist, researcher, policy analyst, and free open source software enthusiast, and an avid advocate for internet freedom. Her work and research focus on the intersection of human rights, gender, policy, and tech. She has worked with various digital rights NGOs with particular focus on issues of freedom of speech and digital safety in the SWANA region. She is a member of the MENA Alliance for Digital Rights and the Global Coalition for Tech Justice. Rima holds a bachelor and master's degrees in public law and political science from the Faculty of Judicial, Political, and Social Sciences of Tunis. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you, and I would like to thank the Disruption Network Lab creating this space for this really important conversation, which I know today in Germany, we don't really have as many spaces, especially to talk about Palestine. I wanted to highlight that everything we've shared in the first day of the conference really informed also what I wanted to share today, and will inform as well an effort to make more connection and create a community node through this Disruption Network Lab with the workshop that's taking place tomorrow for those who are attending. My presentation, I think, starts from a very personal story, one that is marked in the first years as a youth, the few years before the Tunisian Revolution of 2011, where I saw social media, and at that time, Tunisia had one of the heaviest levels of internet censorship. It was at the time compared to Cuba. And we were not really, as citizens, able to access information that is critical of the regime, but also we were isolated from the rest of the world. And at that time, specifically Facebook as a platform, was one of the unique spaces where some of this information slipped through the cracks, let's say. And it was also a space that connected the diaspora, the Tunisian diaspora, and also activists on the ground. And through those spaces, we've also seen, and I want here to insist that it's not just because of the platform itself, but it was one of the components that supported organizing and the sharing of the information and protests. Those days really marked for me, like, I guess, the ideal that is now, I consider it a utopia. How these social media platforms have been a space for connection and a space for where we fought for human rights, and the platforms themselves tried to capitalize also on that in their marketing. We kind of like believed in this grift that those companies, are empowering human rights movements, and it's been really used by these platforms, particularly Meta now, Facebook now Meta, for to show this really great picture of what this platform is for. Taking us now to today's Tunisia, and starting with Tunisia, as I'm from Tunisia, but I would like to, I'm very grateful we're going to be talking about different countries from the Southwest Asia, North Africa, because we've experienced a wave of a rise of racism and xenophobia, specifically since 2023. And the story of this phenomena really started on social media, and started with a political party that didn't really exist on the ground. Didn't have a big following. We didn't even know it existed, but they made use of different social media platforms, but it was, for Tunisia, it's mostly Facebook and less Instagram. They coordinated a campaign to show that immigrants, especially immigrants and asylum seekers from sub-Saharan Africa, as criminals, sharing mostly disinformation or videos that are out of context or outdated, different manipulation techniques. And this campaign reached, we say this in many reports now, but it reached the Palace of Presidency in Tunisia, and it really affected policy making and public speech. But it was not just a phenomena created online that created this phenomena, of course. It was a trigger, an instigator. And at the same time, in Tunisia, we were in a context, and here we see like where things, when it comes like to racism, are very interconnected. At the same time, Meloni and the Italian government were getting in touch with our president, very active in conversations about raising budget for policing and like for what's quote-unquote controlling the migration flows. And the far-right theory of great replacement was discussed during these meetings. And you would say like this is like a very like Eurocentrist or white theory. Just a day after a visit with Meloni, our president, this is in 2023, came with a speech to talk about great replacement theory and how and created this distinction between Tunisians, and we are Africans, we are North Africans, between Tunisians and Africans. There is like this attempt to transform what he called the demographic equality of the country. And it was really shocking, and it was like denounced. But what happened is that a social media, a racist and xenophobic racist campaign affected and had like an effect on policy and enforcement of policy in Tunisia, to the point that today solidarity with migrants is illegal. People who support immigrants in Tunisia right now are in prison, even just supporting like with housing someone or with a donation, or even if you are in a market and like you sell water, like. And from this campaign, we have, as researchers, you know, especially like for the component on social media, we were really shocked because we didn't understand where this came from. And it is obvious that there was a big component in the amplification, like the phenomena is there. Racism is a historic phenomenon in Tunisia and did not start with this social media campaign. But the fear and the level of fear it created in a couple of months, I remember how much it affected the public discourse, and everyone I spoke with in Tunisia, this is what they had on their mind. This is what they had on their feed. And a lot of people, they actually did believe that these videos were true, and it's like part of like a bigger conversation about like digital literacy and how individually people are able to fact check. But if you have this whole combination of like a national context where this is the official speech by the president, and a regional context where with the rise of the far right and xenophobic narratives, there is a creation of a bias on different levels against migrants. And it is not the first instance, but this is one of the most recent instances where we've seen proof of how social media really amplify hate. Hate is there, but the scale of how information, and in this case disinformation, is being shared is a lot bigger, and could and have led to real-life consequences. From this campaign, we've had, for the first time in our history in Tunisia, violence on the streets against migrants. And at the same time, we, as we try to document what's like these, as these violations are taking place, we are met by censorship because the national context has created regulation that's called Law 54, and this is also the president. We've had a coup since 21, and this is the president since. And this law has been focused on posts on social media and created a high level of self-censorship because people are being sentenced to 5 years in prison for criticizing the government, and even more, like the sentence is double if it's like a public official, or especially like if it's the president. So the narratives that have been amplified and still shared are the ones that go with the official narrative and not the opposite. Like the activists are actually the ones who are being erased from the platforms and also from the governments. And I like here to recommend this article by Diana Malled, and this one is particularly on like the context in Lebanon and Syria. But I really liked what she said about putting it very clearly how, and this is like talking about social media algorithms, being a machine that rewards the most extreme outbursts and markets them. The harsher the tone, the bigger the digital return. And this is exactly where the discussion of the economy of screaming and rage begins. And here, like an important reference is to recommender systems and how they work. And the reality that till today we don't really have much visibility when it comes like to algorithms, and also how this recommender system works per each platform, especially we're talking about large social media platforms. And the research, there is a lot of research about youth research and scholars who managed to have limited access to data from this company, but it's more about with like observing what's happening and the way like these recommender system work, and we can see a correlation when it comes to hate speech being always heavily amplified, and speech that engenders like stronger emotions. And we've seen cases in Myanmar, like with the Rohingya community, where, and also with the Rohingya community, where hate speech started online, but actually had like really catastrophic consequences on the ground and led to loss of life. In the region as well, we've seen many cases of journalists being threatened online and targeted like with hate and harassment campaigns, and like doxed, have like disinformation and defamation information shared about them. And the community in the region, they have organized around protecting these people, but we've seen cases where, for instance, like women journalists in Libya were murdered after attempts from civil society like to raise a flag about the hate they're receiving online, and very possible consequences of it dealing to physical threats, and having the companies not do anything about it. And we've seen it also, of course, now in Palestine. Many journalists as well like have been targeted by Israeli media, and they were like, NGOs also raised the flag, raised the alarm about this, and didn't do anything. And now these journalists have been murdered. If this is like a big recommendation from me, like to for those who are not very familiar with digital rights organizations in Palestine, to look at the incredible work of Hamle, a local digital rights organization that has been documenting the different ways social media companies, not only Meta, as you see in this report, have been erasing Palestine and Palestinians' narratives. And what they did, here to answer also Neil's very important point in the introduction about the fact that this erasure is not a bug, because in the beginning, just a few years ago, every time we reach out, there are coalitions like the MENA Coalition for Digital Rights, I'm a member of, but different digital rights organizations, they reach out to the company. They're like, oh, this is a bug, like you come with screenshots, you come with the evidence that content has disappeared or like demoted, accounts have been taken down. It's a bug. So what Hamle, and also there are other digital rights organizations in Palestine like Sada Social, they have been documenting since a few years now. And they have a platform called Hur, for instance, Hamle, for people to submit when when someone's content or account is taken down specifically because of sharing what's happening in Palestine. And Hamle takes all of this evidence back to the work that the advocacy work they're doing to hold these companies accountable. And it resulted a couple of years ago in an effort that led Meta to hire third-party companies to, in this case, BSR, to investigate what the Palestinian activists described as systemic bias. And they were doing this to say, like, we're not biased, but the report actually came with evidence of what they call over-enforcement when it comes to Palestinian content and also other content in Arabic language, and under-enforcement when it comes to Hebrew content. And this meant so much evidence of what's happening for human rights violations in Palestine until today has been deleted, and we will never know the effect of that until later in our history of how much has been erased before even those who are doing the work are able to archive and maintain and keep that crucial evidence. The most recent one, in this report, it's connected to, as a follow-up, for all of this advocacy work that's holding Meta accountable and giving them recommendations with which they actually promise to take into consideration, and seeing that actually they continue with the same bias policies and complicity in enabling discourse that is against Palestinians and in total non-consideration of the measures issued by the International Court of Justice on January 26th, which called for the prevention and punishment of direct and public incitement to commit genocide. From the region as well, a great resource is a report by the Center for Democracy and Technology on the moderation of Arabic content, and in this particular report is in the Maghrebi context. And it circles back to the same core questions, core issues of these large social media platforms, applying a uniform, what they consider a global moderation policy, which I don't think there could be even a global moderation policy. They believe in the universal framework of human rights, but the way it is enforced, it's usually, we've seen it, it's not really taken into consideration regional context, but we've seen as well big failures in moderation of Maghrebi Arabic content. This is due to basically poor investment in moderation of these languages and dialects, from the lack of linguistic diversity in the NLP teams, poor training data, and non-native annotators. And this is a report from 2024, I think, like with the research also taking place in 2023. And more recently, we have also the element that Meta, for instance, decided to take down their program with fact checkers and rely on community notes and other ways of fact checking, which we started already like seeing really worse space for information and fact checking. I know like my time is often, I don't want to take the time of our panelists, so I will just, because I think it's really important, want to just take this moment to give you something very practical that you can support. Here in Germany and in Europe, there is an amazing initiative, the European Legal Support Center, who are actually including social media, like they are taking cases where people have been, people who have been victim of discrimination because of their advocacy for Palestine, and because in these days with the very violent attacks on Gaza, Gaza has been in these recent days, but many times since 2 years ago, without internet. And I wanted to highlight this initiative that you can, where you can donate eSIMs for people in Gaza to be able to connect, and they are the ones we need. They are the ones who are telling us what's happening there. So please feel free to go and support both ELC and Gaza.online. Thank you.
Thank you, Rima, for your talk on how content is weaponized and how people are working against that. And thank you. To continue, we will have Sarah to present their artistic project, AI Work Cloud Database. Sarah is an artist researcher building tools to bring intersectional, critical, creative approaches to machine learning. They hold a PhD in Media Arts and Practice from University of Southern California and are the author of a critical field guide for working with machine learning datasets. They are also the founder of Code Collective, an approachable interdisciplinary community for co-learning programming. Sarah has held fellowships at the Center for Advanced Internet Studies and the Humboldt Institute for Internet and Society. They were recently named an AI newcomer by the German Society for Computing, and their work, AI Work Cloud Database, has won the STARTS Grant Prize from Ars Electronica.
Thank you. Thank you to the fellow panelists and all of the organizers, and thank you all for being here. The AI War Cloud Database is an interactive research tool and artwork that maps the technical systems which amplify and accelerate high-risk military decision-making. Here's the work as a public installation at the Ars Electronica Festival earlier this month. And here is a view of it running as a 3D network. There's also an interactive version available online at aiwar.cloud. So it began with this really deeply personal question to ask myself, what responsibility do I have in choosing the machine learning tools that I myself am working with and examining critically or using in my art practice, when these same types of tools that we're all using daily are also being used to wage war at massive scales. And I kept noticing headlines about bigger, faster, flashier AI, and I kept noticing generative artwork in the circles conversations I was having. And at the same time, this was competing with headlines about AI being weaponized in warfare. Yet, despite the fact that these different uses were relying on similar tools, the conversations were happening in parallel and remained entirely separate. So the AI War Cloud database tries to reveal links between the battlefield systems and commercial AI, between corporate interests and the apps on our phones. And by understanding how the very same kinds of machine learning tasks are used to kill people as are used to recommend movies and to help write emails, this database shows how the increasing weaponization of consumer technology and the inverse, the consumerization of weapons technology, both raise the urgent stakes for the tools in our own pockets. So I'll briefly talk about 4 aspects of this today. What I'm calling this Techno-Imperial Boomerang after Sghaier, how AI is accelerating and amplifying warfare, how it helps privatize power, and where it draws always on prior infrastructures and narratives. So as AI enables massive destruction, it's also entangling this damage with the tools that many of us use each day, including chatbots, search engines, and streaming services, as the data and technology that supports these tools travel from weapon to product and back again. And these shifts are already impacting many of us daily, and it's important to note that they can't be offset by including humans in the loop. They can't be ignored by imagining this, as Neil's saying, as a faraway abstract problem. My research focuses specifically on the machine learning tools which combine massive data sets and compute power to create what militaries call AI decision support systems and the companies behind them. So I'm not focused on drones or the weapons necessarily themselves or the unmanned vehicles, but rather on the data gathering, data processing, the model making, and the decision-making capacities which AI is enhancing and upon which those weapons and the other things like that are increasingly relying. And I'll also note that while the database focuses on these really technical aspects of AI warfare, that this does not discount the truly horrific human aspects that AI warfare impacts. Instead, the work is meant to try to help remove the abstraction of AI. So my research is based on data all from publicly available sources. It includes a variety of recent journalism, military and industrial product websites, white papers, patents, academic scholarship, code documentation, government tenders, and the work already being done by Disruption Lab Network, or Network Lab, excuse me. And so far the database includes just over 60 examples since the year 2000. It's non-comprehensive and gives only a brief description, and these I'm thinking of as touch points for us to provoke connection, conversation, and concern. And it's also deeply affected by where I'm based in the world and what information's available here, and many additional infrastructures and products are supporting these systems, including data centers around the world, chip manufacturers and suppliers that rely on material extraction from the global majority, which all of that is material for potential expansion. So the project is open source and open access to welcome your additions, suggestions, and adaptations. To make the war cloud database, I began looking for patterns across the different kinds of machine learning tools used in AI warfare. And what I found is that almost every conceivable machine learning process is already being employed in state warcraft. So any ML task, any algorithm has some application or is being investigated for one by governments and companies. And conversely, warfare becomes a rapid testing ground for AI systems that are then adapted into commercial products. So to sort through the overwhelming number of systems, I created this broad taxonomy based around their goals and what kind of tasks they would be using to accomplish. And so from there, you can kind of walk across a task from the military, what kind of machine learning it would use, and then how that might get turned into a commercial use, whether that is speculative, something that has actually been made, or whether the companies employing them are the same. So you can follow across to see how a video game becomes a generative mapping tool, how a video recommendation system might relate to a target recommendation system, or how a robot vacuum becomes a bomb robot, which was the case with the well-known smart home company iRobot, which makes Roomba automatic vacuums and used the same tech that mapped people's living rooms to build military robots that map remote terrain. And these examples map this rapid slide from battlefield applications to desktop applications that might seem innocuous and show how this goes both directions. These AI decision-making systems exist on a historical continuum with other tech that has been used for controlling resources, knowledge, and people. We know that empires have long used colonies as laboratories for surveillance and control, which are then imported and deployed on local citizens. For example, in Jordan, the company IrisGuard tested its biometric technology on refugees in UNHCR camps as a mandatory requirement for receiving aid and shelter. And this iris scanning is now part of crypto wallet technology. In this flattened view of a portion of the AI war cloud database, we can see some of the flows that fuel this techno-imperial boomerang, with companies like CoreSight turning tech developed for military use into policing tools, with companies like Axon siphoning consumer data into their policing and military products, not to mention tech giants providing the infrastructure to support it all. And we can see a suite of examples of AI technologies that we'll talk about next. Sorry, this long red line here is the suite of examples that we'll talk about next. Here I want to talk about this acceleration of the testing ground for technology, both upscaling violence and normalizing these frameworks. These tools matter in particular because not only are we using them to decide who lives or dies, but they now speed up these decisions exponentially and then amplify the faulty assumptions that are built into them. Their marketers speak in euphemisms like information dominance and increased combat tempo, which is to say, kill people faster. The US Army has said that it has managed in live tests to shorten its own 20-minute targeting cycle to 20 seconds. And with the help of the gospel system, the IDF moved from generating 50 targets a year to 100 targets every day, with 50% of them being attacked. Scholars and activists Christian Heck and Rainier Rehack liken these systems to dirty bombs rather than precision instruments, because they are producing far more casualties than older forms of warfare. And researchers are already finding that language models are bad decision makers in battlefield contexts. Quote, all 5 off-the-shelf LLMs show forms of escalation and difficult to predict escalation patterns. Models tend to develop arms race dynamics leading to greater conflict. The Israeli military uses a combination of AI systems like Lavender, Fire Factory, Fire Weaver, Wolfpack, Gospel, and Where's Daddy to track and target people. Their Lavender tool creates kill lists. It ranks almost everyone in Gaza for how likely they are to be a militant based only on their alleged similarity to pre-existing targets. To do this, it collects, quote, visual information, cellular information, social media connections, battlefield information, phone contacts, photos, and over time, the machine will come to identify features on its own, end quote. So it analyzes these data and draws connections across them using machine learning, including text analysis, image analysis, ranking, and classification tasks. And I'm glad you brought up recommender systems earlier, because Lavender relies on similar principles to these commercial recommender systems, such as those that operate music streaming or online shopping sites or social media. So for example, if I liked a video reel or forwarded a post on social media, a recommender system is going to mark me as being similar to certain other users who did the same thing. And in the case of Lavender, if I changed my SIM card too often, or if I joined a WhatsApp group, a Meta product, these are some of the behaviors that would target me as a militant and means I would be more likely to be killed. So these are slides from the system describing Lavender. But these systems are using questionable assumptions to produce these kind of digital likenesses and are drawing really dangerous analogies about behavior. So, for example, my digital double can't fully nor accurately represent me. Even example data that I'm judged against may be questionable. We know that foundation models are drawing on data sets with suspect lineages, and their problems remain embedded in the outputs of those models. So how are we to trust them, especially in warfare, when we know their information comes from unstable ground truths, as it always will? And who must we rely on for establishing those ground truths? AI is also helping to shift the balance of power from state actors to a mix of corporate interests that can act across borders and outside legal regulations. So it's not only big defense contractors, but the same Silicon Valley companies that produce personal tech, your Amazon, Google, you know the list. But these companies also include hybrids of the two forms, specializing in tech for militaries, but they're also marketing this to consumers. And this shift empowers private actors to build experimental technologies using public money, but working outside regulatory bounds and profiting from these tools in commercial contexts. So as more and more tech startups become defense contractors, the database tries to suggest a framework to explore the shifts in power that move us toward private, unregulated control and algorithmic logics. This slice of the database focuses on two big names in this sphere, Palantir and Anduril, who are entangled with both major governments and other major Silicon Valley companies. So for example, Palantir CEO Alex Karp describes their artificial intelligence platform as, quote, an army of AI agents that do what I say for me, end quote. So this is a demo of the tool as it would be deployed in active combat contexts, and users can interact conversationally to understand battlefields and execute commands. Meanwhile, on their commercial site, Palantir pitches the same platform as a dashboard for supply chain management at scale for tracking infrastructure, for example. And this looks very similar to these same kind of chat interfaces that you would already be familiar with, where you can upload documents and the system can have these agents that modify files and output summaries in different tones. But we already know that these systems output inaccurate information, some of them more than half the time. Another product from Palantir is called Gotham, and here's a tool, a demo of it coordinating military action, incorporating satellites, CCTV. Palantir's Foundry product here is not AI alone, but is interesting to me because it enables machine learning by organizing different kinds of disparate data and creating these dynamic databases. And so these kinds of tools help enable the tracking of lots of individuals across various platforms, even when the data has been anonymized. And we see in this demo is really interesting to me because it gives us a sense of the designer's imaginary for how these systems work. In this example, it might be a little small, but you can, this is they're tracking a terrorist trainer camp. So this is what they imagine it might be used for. Meanwhile, in the patent application, they're tracking people through academic organizations, charity donations, travels, and device usage. So AI warfare requires infrastructure that is not itself AI, and these so-called kill chains are usually a combination of multiple processes, some of which are not strictly machine learning. They're part of larger systems and longer stories of fitting together many pieces of fallible tech and fallible people. They rely on existing non-smart infrastructures and hardware that's already in place. So camera networks, satellite networks, wireless and data centers with new innovations. So therefore, rejecting these forms of automated decision-making begins before they have arrived. It begins with rejecting the systems and the technologies which precede them. And part of tracing these contemporary systems is to trace the material origins and to link them with longer histories of technology and political power. From IBM's De Homag punch card tabulator used in Nazi Germany to IBM's simultaneous translation system first used at Nuremberg and the Dynaspeak translation system used in Iraq in the US, by the US. Even Apple's Siri assistant was first called Callow and was a DARPA-created assistant for battlefield commanders. Another Palantir patent uses placeholder data from England's days of empire and the Tudor dynasty, and the first PowerPoint demo from 1990, 97, 87, I might have that wrong, I'll get back to you. It features a slide deck in which Christopher Columbus pitches foreign conquest to Spain, including through improved technologies and military force used against local populations. These may be intended to be lighthearted, but it's not a new habit or entirely a joke. It goes to show that these intertwined narratives of power and tech run that deep. So there are centuries of collaboration between war machines and technology research embedded in the narratives of the latest technologies and in the infrastructures that support them. In this slice of the database, you can see some of the smaller startups I mentioned, supported by government and venture capital, creating experimental new tech. They provide rapid deployment to active conflicts and are much harder to track and regulate. And those long-standing collaborations between war and tech research continue in full force, only repackaged again as innovation and digital sovereignty. The specific tasks, processes, and materials that build AI matter, and pinpointing the tangible machine learning tools used in warfare helps us start to connect the dots of the AI system so that we can take responsibility for the choices we do have. Because of the connections across corporate and state actors in the techno-military domain, AI warfare affects all of us, even if we are not directly impacted by war. The technologies that are tested in conflict zones are reappearing on our own devices. They are imminently adaptable for fascism, both home and abroad. The consequences are potentially and often already horrific, and they require our response. They ask all of us to examine how we rely on those tools, where we source them, and how we will shift those choices. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for your presentation, for bringing in your project, that you actually detailed the exact connections that I was talking about. So we have that weaponization of content, but also weaponization of vacuum cleaners. So thank you. And now we will turn to Leah for her talk, Toy Nations for Crypto Worlds. Leah is a Salvadoran journalist based in Berlin and co-founder of feminist media organization Alaraca. Her work focuses on democracy and human rights both back home and in Germany. In addition to journalism, she works for civil society organizations in Germany and Latin America in the field of communication and project management. She's currently working on 2 multilingual podcast formats.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Very much. I'm really excited to be here and to hear about your fascinating work. I'm also quite intimidated because I don't come from I don't work with tech. I'm not a tech expert. I'm not a digital rights expert. I'm a journalist, and I work on democracy, on Central American politics, and human rights advocacy. So I'm really glad to be here. The reason why I'm here is because human rights work in Central America and democracy work in Central America in the last 5 years, I'd say, has intersected a lot with the global development of the tech industry and of big tech. And Central America, that really small region, is economically sort of insignificant and very small, but throughout the years, it's been a sort of laboratory for both authoritarian but also democratic tendencies, think proxy wars in the last century, or even the development of the liberal paradigm for peace building, for example. And now we are sort of a laboratory for this unholy alliance between authoritarian leaders, anarcho-capitalist, libertarian ideologues, and big tech entrepreneurs, right? So I will specifically be talking about 2 examples in Honduras and in my homeland, El Salvador, about crypto, about private cities, about the quest for eternal life, and about how I got to work on these random issues. Because as I said, I don't work in tech, and we have kind of a saying among colleagues in El Salvador, which is that everything we know about Bitcoin, we know against our will. But it had to happen because of this man. We have the privilege in El Salvador to have the coolest dictator in the world, self-appointed. His name is Nayib Bukele, and for those who don't know him, he was a relatively young politician that he was an ad man. He came from Like he had an ad agency, and he used that knowledge to market himself as kind of an outsider to politics. And people in El Salvador were really fed up with the bipartisan system, so they quickly elected him because the former parties were not able to like get rid of violence, get rid of endemic poverty, of crime. So this was an opportunity to try out something new. And he promised a modernization of the country, he promised progress, he promised freedom. And since then, he has dismantled basically all democratic institutions in the country. He has taken over all branches of government. He has enacted a state of exception in the whole country and locked up over 90,000 people, so 2% of the entire population. He has forced journalists and activists into exile, managed to get re-elected even though it's illegal, changed the constitution for indefinite re-election, and as many of you might know, made a deal with Donald Trump to host graciously in our maximum security prison prisoners or migrants that Trump sends. And back to the reason why we learned about Bitcoin against our will. This man on June 5th, 2021, announced, not in Spanish, not to us, but to a conference in Miami Beach full of Bitcoin bros, crypto bros, that El Salvador was going to become the first country in the world to have Bitcoin as legal tender, to have cryptocurrency as legal tender. And we were very shocked. We didn't know this was happening. We had to learn a lot about the blockchain, about crypto, about Bitcoin, basically overnight, because the law was passed 3 days later. We had to learn about it, but also his legislators had to learn about it. I remember the day that it was passed, we talked to a couple of legislators from his party, and they didn't know what blockchain was. Like minutes before they passed the law, they didn't understand that mining Bitcoin doesn't mean actual physical mining. It was strange, and I would dare to say that they cannot explain blockchain even now, 4 years later. So 2 months later, it was implemented. They even created a state-owned wallet. It was a very bad wallet, constantly malfunctioning, and also in a country where internet penetration isn't even that good, but the law actually forced every business to take Bitcoin, even if they didn't have the technical capacities for that, which was later reformed. And as this was happening, the law was passed at midnight almost, because that's what politicians usually do when they don't want people to find out what's going on. And while this was happening, he was, again, not speaking to the population, but speaking in a Twitter space with Bitcoin activist Nick Carter, not to be confused with the singer, he's another guy. And he held a Twitter space where he was like discussing the law with Bukele directly. And I have an audio, and I don't know if the acoustic is going to allow you to hear, but this is Bukele speaking at the Twitter space.
I mean, there's a lot of things I know, but there's a lot of things I don't know. And one of the things I don't know is the limits of what this is going to become. I know that it's going to be good. I know that it's going to be great. I know that it's going to be very, very important for a lot of people. But I don't really know the limits of this. It's just things are just happening, and we're learning by the minute, and we're seeing things happen by the minute. And right now, the assembly is discussing the bill. The bill is going to pass. I mean, it's almost 100% chance that it's going to pass. So, and while this is happening in the assembly, we're just talking here, and a lot of people got interested in our talk, and you know, this is just happening by the minute. I really don't know what that means, or what's the limit.
So he was basically like frantically admitting that he didn't fully understand what was being approved. Yeah. And when it was actually passed, the activists, the tech activists, the Bitcoin bros celebrated, really like children who just got a new toy to play with. That's the other audio. It's very short, sorry.
So the bill passes with supermajority. Congratulations to you all.
All right. To you, back.
Huge.
Fantastic.
Amazing.
Well done.
Huge.
We only needed 43 votes, but it passed with a supermajority, which is good because, I mean, it's representative of the whole nation. The whole nation is behind this.
This is, by the way, not a Salvadoran guy. These are like a lot of like Eastern European and American people who see themselves as architects of this like innovative, revolutionary idea that was finally being put in practice in El Salvador. And a lot of them, the most sycophantic ones, even got positions in the government, and we still pay for their salaries with our taxes. So that's beautiful. And like a couple of months later, we got a new announcement, which was Bitcoin City, which was going to be a coin-shaped city at the feet of a volcano. It was going to have, or it is going to have, its own airport, its own rail system, commercial areas, residential areas, and the most important thing, tax incentives. It's going to be a tax-free zone, no capital gains tax, no property tax, nothing, except for VAT. But he clarified that the VAT is going to be used to clean up the streets. So it's all good. And he was very excited. I don't know if you can read, but this was like a year later. He was like, oh, Bitcoin City is coming along beautifully. And it shows this like beautiful golden model, very a la Trump. Anyway, this is what Bitcoin City looks like right now. They've just started working on the ground for the airport. It's 4 years later. So it's basically a mirage, but what is actually tangible is the damage that's been caused to the communities that live there, because of course there were communities that have been displaced. About 200 homes have been displaced from that sector, the community El Condadillo. There's one of the biggest mangrove forests or saltwater forests there, very important for carbon capture, for the biodiversity, to prevent destruction from hurricanes. That's gone, which is kind of self-defeating because if there's a hurricane, Bitcoin City is going to be wiped. And people are actually suffering. I just have like a brief recommendation, please. Follow the work of two of our best journalists in El Salvador, Nelson Rauda and Victor Peña. They've been following the plight of these communities for a long time, and they're both in exile because they have arrest warrants in El Salvador. So yeah, very good work. And now back to Honduras, because in Honduras we have a sort of precedent for Bitcoin City, which is sedes. Sedes are, in Spanish, special zones for employment and economic development. Yes. And they are very special, like they're more than trade zones, which are pretty common, like free trade zones, which are pretty common in the global south. They're more than tax-free zones, which would be what Bitcoin City is going to be like. They are basically autonomous pieces of land within nations that are controlled by, they're like concessions to private businesses, and they're controlled by them. They have their own economic, political, and judicial system. This also happened in Honduras at a moment where, like right after the coup, there was a coup in 2009 where a left-wing government was ousted by a right-wing government, and they were looking for ways to make money because they were kind of international pariahs. So they came up with this idea based on the concept of charter cities by economist Paul Romer. And of course, you might ask yourself, like, is this legal? It wasn't legal, but that government reformed the constitution so that this could actually happen in Honduras. And since then, like since 2012, I think that the constitution was reformed. 5 sedes have been established. I think 3 are operating now: Orquídea, Morazán, and Próspera. And Próspera is the one, like this is the website of Próspera. Próspera is located in this really beautiful island, Roatán, in the Caribbean. It is, I guess, the most successful one because it's actually a settlement, but it's not really a city. It's more like a tiny enclave. It supposedly has about 1,800 inhabitants, but they have this concept of e-residency, where you can pay $130 a year to be able to purchase property there and live there for up to like 6 months. On the website, it says that people who are actually living there are like 79 people, so it's not really a success. They exist since 2018, I think. They don't have a mayor, they have a CEO, the CEO of Prospera Honduras Incorporated. His name is Eric Briman. He's a Venezuelan-American tech investor. And he stands on the shoulders of giants because Prospera has investments from Sam Altman, which you may know, OpenAI, from Peter Thiel, which you may know, Palantir, and other people from Coinbase, for example, a lot of crypto guys. But the biggest industry that's booming there is, also, this is kind of their whole thing. It's an autonomous zone. This is kind of their big thing, health, tech, and the pursuit of eternal life. So they've been having like a bunch of conferences on that, and the few companies that advertise working there are companies that are trying to extend lifespans, basically. So they have like human brain uploading, and they have like a lot of biohacking, a lot of gene therapy, all of this that is not allowed in Europe and the United States for obvious reasons. If you are interested in like prolonging your life right now, this September, we have the Biofrontiers month. You can go for they have hotels and everything. One of the regular clients is Brian Johnson, who you might know because he's trying to prolong his life by injecting his son's blood. And he got treatment, he got an implant in his stomach, I don't know. In any case, there is resistance against this, of course, because when these sort of things happen, they are thinking about the present, like my president, you know. Don't think about the limits of this. And one of the limits is when a new government is in power, they are going to try to prevent this from happening. And the new left-wing government in Honduras, or newish left-wing government in Honduras, has tried to abolish SEDES and to abolish Prospera. And Prospera is fighting back. They're still working, you know, business as usual. They are litigating this in an international trade court, and they have good chances of winning. They're suing the state of Honduras for $11 billion. Honduras is a very poor country. This would bankrupt the country. But still, people are fighting back, especially the people from Crawfish Rock, which is the community where Prospera is located. They call it a new form of colonization, and they've built like this really wide alliance, especially with other Afro-Indigenous communities in Honduras that are very active, doing advocacy work, doing political work against it. Actually, some people from these organizations are going to be here in Berlin next week. You can ask me if you're interested in talking to them. Yeah, and then in El Salvador, things are different because there's no independent judicial to go to. There's the state of exception that's like putting at risk basically anyone who dares to speak out against it. But still, the communities that are being displaced, like they're at risk of losing everything they have and like everything they've known. So they're still like every week they're still protesting and risking being arrested with no due process. They're fighting back. And also journalists who are in exile are still like challenging the difficulties of reporting from exile to bring attention to it. My time is almost through, and I just wanted to say that to me, to see the expansion of these strategies and these logics to the global north, which has been like so accelerated, right? We're kind of like the canary in the coal mine. But I didn't think that I would see the same things that I saw in El Salvador just 5 years ago at a global level. You know, to see these sycophantic tech bros swarming around my president, and then suddenly to see the same people or people who are tied to these people at the royal banquet with Trump and with King Charles and everything. Like, it's terrifying. So my plea to everyone would be like, listen to displaced communities in places like Central America that are experiencing this firsthand. First, because even though it's an experiment, even though we'll see what happens, these people are human beings. Their lives matter. Our lives matter. We're not lab rats. But also because the tech bros are not going to stay with us. They're coming for you too, and they're coming faster than you think. So, listen.
Thank you, Leah. So now we not only see how technologies are connected across domains, but also powerful actors are connected as well, and how capital moves through these connections. Next up, we have Safa to present her talk, Digitized Device, Revealing the Trade-offs of a Tech-Dependent World. Safa Ghnaim spent her formative years assisting in presentations at multicultural folk and peace festivals around the United States, with the aim of preserving the endangered art of traditional Palestinian embroidery and educating the public on the Palestinian diaspora experience. In 2018, Safa edited the book Tatriz and Tea, Embroidery and Storytelling in the Palestinian Diaspora, a project that was very personal for her. Safa is passionate about inclusivity and accessibility, as well as the intersectionality between environmentalism, human rights, and animal rights. Since 2018, she has assisted in various classroom community edition installations.
Apple's iPad Pro May 2024 advertisement showed a steel hydraulic press smash music and art. Paints, light, and screens explode, as well as humanistic figures like an emoji whose eyes popped out of its head from the untenable pressure, opening again to reveal nothing but a shiny new device. Throughout the advertisement, the Sonny and Cher song, All I Ever Need Is You, plays in the background. After intense backlash, Apple pulled the ad. Many saw the destruction shown in the advertisement unsettling, including Wall Street Journal reporter Katie Dayton, who wrote, "This ad perfectly encapsulates the insight that people think technology is killing everything we ever found joy in, and then presents it as a good thing." Apple's advertising sits within a wider context where promises of technology's positive impacts on society have long experienced a dissonance between the way it's marketed to mainstream audiences and the reality of the consequences caused by it. I'm Safa Ghnaim, a critical tech researcher and educator. I'm a US-born diaspora Palestinian who's been based in Germany for over a decade. My research has looked into AI-fueled discrimination and abuse, inhumane labor conditions, and the environmental impacts of technologies affecting people from historically marginalized backgrounds, and more specifically, people of the global majority. My research is very Western-centric, and that's somewhat inevitable. Big tech companies are largely based in the West, specifically the US, but has tangible effects on the rest of the world. I've looked into Israel's use of AI-powered weapons against Palestinians, many of which are funded and backed by US government agencies and US headquartered tech companies like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. European governments and institutions, such as Horizon Europe, are also responsible for funding projects by Israeli groups which make their way to weapons, infrastructure, and machinery that is being used to genocide my people right now. Physical, real-world issues are interconnected with virtual technologies, and these connections are not one-time flukes. Rather, they're rooted in long-standing systems of domination and oppression, power structures that we see entrenched in business models. Techno-violence echoes across all aspects of technology, from how it's built to how it is applied. We should retire notions of techno-solutionism. Technology will not save us from ourselves because everything we create comes from the limitations of our own minds and muscle memory. We need to look frankly at the consequences of technology as environmentally and socially harmful physical infrastructures. We also need to face the ways in which our collective data is being used for purposes that harm individuals and society. Is this really the reality we want for ourselves? And at the same time, it's senseless to demonize technology in and of itself. We haven't yet reached a futuristic reality where killer robots are rolling around without the aid of human beings to build, program, and implement them, as well as to charge their batteries. We keep coming back to the same key point. Human beings are ultimately responsible for the harms inflicted upon the environment and humanity. Tech is built on exploitation. In my research, I've only just scratched the surface. When people talk about natural versus artificial, there is an assumption that technology sits on the artificial side, but the elements and materials it's made from come from the earth and are handled by many people. What really is natural after all? Let's zoom into the story of cobalt mining in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Cobalt is a stone that has an almost eerie blue color. It has also become essential for the manufacturing of rechargeable batteries, like those that enable smartphones, laptops, electric cars, and more. Cobalt is just one of the natural resources powering the green energy revolution. But this important stone can be toxic to touch and breathe, especially in high doses. To understand the harmful effects of cobalt mining in the DR Congo, it is essential to consider its colonial history. Continued exploitation of the country's resources persisted even after gaining formal independence in 1960, and is a legacy that continues to shape the country's mining sector today. Kolwezi, a city in the DR Congo, was built by Belgium under an apartheid-style system of urban segregation, and now has many large open-pit mines situated in and around its periphery. The DR Congo supplies 70% of the world's cobalt, but yet, according to the World Bank Group, they are one of the 5 poorest nations on Earth, with about 3/4 of people living on less than $2 per day. The cobalt supply chains in the DR Congo are uniquely dominated by China, while US-based tech giants such as Apple rely on the DR Congo's cobalt supplies to meet their production demands. Both multinational companies with concessions and artisanal miners are involved in cobalt mining in the DR Congo, though industrial mines now dominate the region. What is called artisanal and small-scale mining remains widespread, with thousands of informal miners working in dangerous conditions to extract cobalt by hand. The term artisanal is evocative of a quaint neighborhood farmer's market or traditional handmade cheese or soap, not often thought of as children and adults digging toxic stones from the ground with their bare hands at gunpoint. The term partly comes from its low-tech nature, as it involves individuals mining deposits that are either unprofitable, unsafe, or otherwise unsuitable for large-scale mining companies. Yet, artisanal mining is far from small. Over 100 million people worldwide are engaged in or rely on the income it generates. While industrial mining has one of the worst track records for human rights abuses, artisanal mining often lacks environmental and worker safeguards, as well as lacks protections for children's rights. A 2022 Amnesty International report detailed several cases of human rights abuses at 3 sites where they used documentary evidence, satellite images, and interviews with former residents to determine that people had been forcibly evicted from their homes in the name of energy transition mining. Unfortunately, drawing the parallel between rare earth mineral laborers in places like the DR Congo to experiencing what is akin to modern-day slavery is not an over-dramatization. Siddharth Kara, who focuses his over 2 decades of research, lectures, and publications on modern-day slavery, human trafficking, and child labor, calls it just that. He spells it out in unambiguous terms, saying, You have people with no alternative, no other source of income, no livelihood. Now add to that the menace, in many cases, of armed forces pressuring people to dig, parents bringing all their kids into these toxic pits to dig just to earn that 50 extra cents or $1 a day that could mean the difference between eating or not. So, in the 21st century, this is modern-day slavery. It's not chattel slavery from the 18th century, where you can buy and trade people and own title over a person like property, but the level of degradation, the level of exploitation is on par with old world slavery. He added, the bottom of the supply chain, where almost all of the world's cobalt is coming from, is a horror show. Major exploitation can be seen in other parts of the world when rare earth mineral mines are found and local people are living in low-income conditions, or there's a major income disparity in the population, resulting in the powerful taking advantage of the vulnerable. But the DR Congo has some of the most well-documented reports, photos, and videos of the extreme conditions. Concerns for the health of people exposed to cobalt are severe. Tumors, infections, and one woman told Sky News in 2017, "We think the mine is toxic and destroys the babies inside us." Tech is also used to control and oppress. In my research, I've only just scratched the surface. I will zoom into how Israel is committing an AI-powered genocide against my people that is funded and supported by the United States and many European countries, including Germany. Israel uses data they take from Palestinians to train AI-powered automated tools that have been deployed in Gaza and across the West Bank. Israeli AI supercharged surveillance tools and spyware, including Pegasus, Paragon, Quadream, Candiru, Cellbrite, as well as AI weaponry, including the Smart Shooter and Lavender, have received both condemnation from human rights groups and keen interest from governments worldwide, including Russia, Belarus, Mexico, the United States, Germany, and many more. In 2021, US headquartered companies Google and Amazon jointly signed an exclusive billion-dollar contract with the Israeli government to develop Project Nimbus, which was meant to advance technologies in facial detection, automated image categorization, object tracking, and sentiment analysis for military use. The Israeli army also has ties with Microsoft for machine learning tools and cloud storage. These examples are brought in here to show the imbalance of power within the greater systems of oppression at play. These tools and corporate ties are not accessible to all potential benefactors. It would be inconceivable for Google, Amazon, and Microsoft to sign these same contracts with, say, Palestinian resistance groups. Former US President Barack Obama is credited for normalizing the use of armed drones in non-battlefield settings. The Obama administration described drone strikes as surgical and precise, at times even claiming that the use of armed drones resulted in not a single collateral death, even when that was patently false. Since Obama took office in 2009, drone strikes became commonplace and even expanded in US international actions of the subsequent administrations. Critics say the use of drones in warfare gives governments the power to act as judge, jury, and executioner from thousands of miles away, and that civilians disproportionately suffer in an urgent threat to the right of life. In one example, the BBC described Russian drones as hunting Ukrainian civilians. Already in 2009, Human Rights Watch reported on Israel's use of armed drones in Gaza. 2009. In 2021, Israel started deploying drone swarms in Gaza to locate and monitor targets. 2001. In 2022, an Israeli commander said, "The whole of Gaza is covered with unmanned aerial vehicles that collect intelligence 24 hours a day." That was 2022. In Gaza, drone technology has played a major role in increasing damage and targets, including hybrid drones such as the Rooster and robodogs that can fly, hover, roll, and climb uneven terrain. Machine gun rovers have been used to replace on-the-ground troops. The AI-powered smart shooter, whose slogan is "one shot, one hit," boasts a high degree of accuracy. They say, the system locks in on the target and follows it using artificial intelligence to process the image in real time. The bullet exits the gun only when the hit is ensured. The smart shooter was installed during its pilot stage in 2022 at a Hebron checkpoint, where it remains active to this day. Israel also employs missiles like the Spice 2000, which was used in October 2024 to bomb a Beirut high-rise apartment building. The Israeli military is considered to be in the top 20 most powerful military forces in the world. Civilian harm expert Larry Lewis has said Israel's civilian harm mitigation strategies have been insufficient, with their campaigns seemingly designed to create risk for civilians. While AI-powered technologies reduce boots on the ground and therefore potential injuries and casualties of the military who deploy them, they greatly increase casualty to civilians. The Israeli military claims AI-powered systems have minimized collateral damage and raised the accuracy of the human-led process, and that would only be true if killing civilians were the whole point. In July 2025, two Australian professors, Dr. Richard Hill and Dr. Gideon Polya, gave a new insight into the estimated toll of Palestinians killed in Gaza. Their calculations of deaths from deprivation plus violent deaths totaled 680,000 Palestinians killed since October 2023. They said most of these victims, as indicated in earlier counts by the Ministry of Health, are women and children. The estimate of 680,000 Gazan deaths, therefore, is about 12 to 14 times greater than the death toll of about 50 to 55,000 presently reported by nearly all Western mainstream media. In 2024, UN experts deplored Israel's use of AI to commit crimes against humanity in Gaza. Regardless of that, all of the aforementioned information, that same year, Israel signed a global treaty on AI developed by the Council of Europe for safeguarding human rights. Let's get one thing straight. Focusing exclusively on technology and Israel's committing genocide in Gaza, or the use of technology in any war, for that matter, could risk a major mistake, absolving the perpetrators' responsibility of crimes they commit using technology. When overemphasizing the tools, it can become all too easy to redefine intentional abuses as machine-made mistakes. While some may ask whether the benefits of using technology outweigh the harms, comparing the benefits and harms in this balanced, binary, two-sided approach is a misguided way to assess it critically, especially when the harms include violence against civilians. After all, human suffering is never justified, and there's no ways to sugarcoat negative repercussions in good faith. Technological both-sidesism attempts to determine the goodness or brownie points of technology, which is a distraction because technology itself isn't good or bad. It's about the humans behind it, the owners and operators behind the machines. Depending on the intentions and aims of those people, technology can be used for a wide variety of purposes. Ultimately, technology mirrors the problems we grapple with in our physical world, and these are reflected in our digital systems. Exploitation, dispossession, and subjugation of people is something that should not have a place in modern times, but these injustices also continue to be committed. The popular marketing of technologies, such as AI, tend to repeat terms like efficiency. But what are we actually facilitating when we use technology? If we look together at the cases, what is being facilitated is, more often than not, human and environmental harm. It doesn't have to remain this way, but how long will it take to make a change, and what will be lost along the way? And a robot-led reality is unlikely, but a reality where we accept violence as the status quo is already here.
Thank you, Safa, for tracing different localities of techno-violence. And thank you all for all your different cases, different examples. And even though they all seem different from one another, there are multiple ideas that run through your talks. And I want to begin with maybe talking a little bit about the promises of technologies. For example, in the case of nation state, we have the promise of cleaning up the nation from who doesn't belong, the promise of belonging, right? And then, of course, we have the promise of economic growth, development, promise of progress. And then we have the promise of accuracy, speed, efficiency. So these are all like these different packages of these shiny ideas that technologies are all presented or marketed, sold, and circulated. And maybe you want to say something about these promises, and then we'll take it from there.
I think that the way like we've seen new technologies being developed has always been within a system that you have described that is based on extraction and making profit. So I see a lot of what Safa mentioned. I think this is our reality today. Everything is about productivity and efficiency and like being packaged and especially marketed, because like we mentioned a lot of AI, like the term in itself started as a grift, as a marketing ploy, and here we are today only talking about it as it's like a real thing that is intelligence and artificial. There is a promise that I think as human beings we all have connected with, either being able to communicate with others around the world, share knowledge, archive, document, collaborate. I think these are aspirations that are still here today, but I would say at least the internet, because I don't want to always stay in broad like that, but the internet we once dreamed of, it's not the internet we have today. And also yesterday we had a presentation, a book presentation that showed maybe how this internet basically died. I think that, and something that I'm very passionate about, there is always still a way, and I take a lot of inspiration from the open source community in taking back the tech and developing technology that is based on goodness and joy and justice and equity, but is very hard to build those solutions and also those communities within a mainstream culture that is forcing many people to be stuck and to believe also, like the marketing part is very important, to believe it's a belief system, that this is like the only solution, or this is the only way to use technology. And the term despair was mentioned a lot. Also yesterday, but today, around like all of these harms that we've seen, facilitated by technology, amplified by technology. And in many case studies and examples mentioned, I want just to say, like, we should be careful about describing the solutions as omnipotent and creating more despair, and always having space to think that there are ways to resist, and I think that's the promise I really want to bring here. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And along those lines, I was thinking about how the promise is part of this AI hype, and the flip side of that, or the dark side of that, is saying to us, don't try to understand this. You could never understand this. It's bigger than us. Even we don't understand it, but it will take care of it. So don't look in the black box, right? Don't try. And I think that the best thing we can do, or one of the things we need to do as part of this resistance, is to understand what's happening, and not to let them make the choices for us of this is the only way that AI can be, or this is the only way that we can solve these problems. Of course, AI will do this better and faster, so this is the way we should do it. But twofold, we could design AI differently, because we can also step in and be part of these conversations and understand what they are doing over there. It's not the hype that they are promising that it is.
I
Hey, it's not that hard, you guys. Like, if they can do it, we can do it.
Yeah. About the understanding part, like I didn't really do like the epilogue of what happened with Bitcoin in El Salvador, which is that even though it was implemented and like forcibly implemented really fast, people were kind of skeptical from the beginning. It was like the first crack in this beautiful facade that Bukele has put up, but people were like, okay, let's give it a chance, because they're promising that this will like allow us inclusion in the banking system and all those lovely things that crypto bros say. And then they tried it out and they realized that they had no use for it, absolutely no use. None of the case uses worked for them. So 4 years later, Bitcoin isn't used in El Salvador, basically. It didn't make any difference. It didn't like actually promote banking inclusion, or people were not using it for remittances, which was like a big case use. So I think like understanding things instead of thinking, okay, the blockchain is very, very difficult. No, people in villages who were promised banking inclusion were like, okay, let's figure out how this works. And then they were like, oh, it works like shit. Okay, no. And that was it. And now it's not even legal tender anymore.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, you know, we talked a bit about the mining, so the very start of technology, and then a lot about applications. But actually, there's a whole bunch in the middle that we didn't have a chance to touch on, which is also people who are being exploited and extracted and erased. You know, for example, factory workers who are putting together the phones, click and gig workers and data labelers, and people who are actually training these systems and getting paid like nothing. You know, there's also like delivery drivers and warehouse workers who are distributing and shipping these products to stores and to us, who are also being exploited. So there's so many other steps along the way, and it's quite interesting because technology, of course, they have these great marketing of like, it's so efficient and it's so like shiny and lightweight, and but it's actually very hot and heavy and loud and takes up a lot of physical space and uses you know, hundreds of millions of workers and the data of billions of people, billions being all of our data. So it's actually not as sleek as they make it seem to be. So it's good, like, let's keep poking holes in this, and let's keep letting them know that like they can say whatever they want to us, but we see actually what is happening.
Yeah, so we had these sterilizing techno-imaginaries and promises. But at the beginning, I was talking about imagining alternative futures and turning them into shared realities. So before opening up the discussion to our audience questions, maybe I can invite you all to say something about your alternative imaginaries for the future and strategies of turning them into realities. I know you already hinted at something, and I know this is a very kind of a broad question, but I will still ask that.
I just want to add one small thing after what Safa has just shared, what is like in between. The environmental cost, like the sheer environmental cost is really not being talked about enough, and not as an alternative, but as a resistance. Like if we follow the news today, there are resistance communities everywhere where data centers and where big companies are building infrastructure that is extracting water and that is destroying environment for different communities around the world. And it's mostly in majority world countries, but we've seen it also recently in the US. And it's really important to have the environmental aspect in the forefront when we talk about harms and these new technologies. I guess like for reimagining or imagining alternatives, I want to say that first thing, there are alternatives, and there are communities which have been working for years as the private sector has on providing technology that centers humans and that is driven by privacy, by security, by usability. It's just that the machine that is behind the mainstream solutions is a lot more powerful because of the capitalist system that we live in. So I think that it's not just about imagining new alternatives, it's just about how we connect more communities, which is other first, that are doing this kind of work, and having more support and more resources invested in these communities. And this is something that could not happen on an individual level. It's important that we see in legislation and like public funding, in policy, in decision making, this intention to move away from big tech and harmful tech and the technology that we know we have spoken about today.
Yeah, I think that we really have to think about it on all fronts. Like I'm thinking about what Ifoma said yesterday about the sort of plastic straw problem, that like it's not something that we can adjust just by changing what app we're using. But I do think that that is a worthwhile undertaking also, because if there are enough of us thinking about this together, that is what we can do on one level. There is a kind of, how can we use the tools that we think come with the values that we also share, and how can we as communities think about what kinds of tools we want to build, and starting with the goals that would support our own communities, like at the community level rather than only at an individual level, while also tackling that at a policy level. I think it has to happen all the places at once with some urgency.
Not really. I'm not a very optimistic person. It's not really the nature of my job to be that optimistic. And I guess what I'm confronted with is not the technology per se, but like the democratic structures around it. And right now, that's not looking great anywhere. But I do look at the communities that are managing to fight back, and what they all have in common is, for different reasons, they have a very strong, there's a word in Spanish, tejido social, they're really cohesive socially, they're really close, and they're communities that have managed to like fight other developments like gang violence, for example, or these are communities where Bukele isn't that strong, even though he's strong in the entire country. So to me, the future, as a Luddite, I'm kind of a Luddite. It's weird that I'm in a Techno-Violence conference, but it's offline. Everything is offline. I think community building is going to happen offline, and that's the path that we have to take.
Maybe just to add to what's already been said, I mean, obviously, I think just in my ideal future I'd be in free Palestine and on a beach somewhere and not having to talk about any of this. So that would be it for me.
Okay, so we can have some questions from the audience. Yeah. Microphone.
Yes, thank you.
I'm referring to what you said, both tech can be good, or technology can be good or bad. Is that hearable? Or technology is never neutral. So I'm really wondering how can Bitcoin be so much loved by nerds and freedom lovers on the one hand, and from dictators and Trump and the like on the other hand? What in the technique is it that makes it attractive for the ones and the others? I would really love to understand that.
Since it's about Bitcoin, maybe it's for me. Like Bitcoin, or more than Bitcoin, actually crypto, like is at its core it is a revolutionary technology. It wasn't originally co-opted by these billionaire investors. Like it began. There's like a very, I mean, everyone, or a lot of people probably know, it has like this very legendary beginning by this like anonymous ideologue who created the white paper for it, and it was a nerd idea. It was very popular along like anarchist circles, and with time, specifically through Bitcoin, it was co-opted by wealthy investors. It was co-opted as a means to avoid state controls, which is very, very promising, not only for libertarians, not only for criminals, but also for authoritarian leaders that don't want to be traced. It's very paradoxical that this like very inherently libertarian idea, inherently libertarian, and not I mean libertarian in like the anarchist way, not in the anarcho-capitalist way. Technology would be co-opted in that sense, but it was like the entering of these very wealthy actors that now completely dominate the crypto landscape. They dominate a lot of coins, and people are really trying to like build alternatives to this. There are some coins that are trying to not have these disadvantages. There are some people that still claim that crypto is the future. This is like the way out for economic independence and development independence in the global south. But reality is showing that these lawless spaces just attract people who take advantage of lawlessness.
I'm very close to the mic, moving. First of all, thank you. This was a super interesting panel. I have two questions. My first is, we talked a lot about technology and exploitation. I would ask, is it technology or is it capitalism? And technology is now the hottest thing, and it's built on endless growth, and we've had exploitation and capitalism for ages. It's built on slavery, it's built on colonialism, and technology is just following the rules of capitalism. If it wasn't technology, it would be another industry doing exactly the same. Thus, yeah, I would love to understand a bit why you think or what is different in the era of technology versus capitalism before. And then my second question would be to Sarah and Leah. I loved also the following up of both of your presentations, is between AI making decisions and between state leaders that are tweeting at midnight, like Trump. What is the best solution? Who should make those decisions, to be very honest? I'm not sure if maybe AI is actually better than, yeah, your crypto bro president.
Maybe I can answer 2 in 1, because I think the problem is that the AI or any of the technology is always the tool of the people in power. So it's like my primary lens for all of this research is intersectionality as the study of power and how power is moving through institutions and structures, right? So it would be whether it's a really sophisticated tool that can help, and I use sophisticated not as intelligent, a sophisticated tool that can help accelerate at a faster speed, or we're talking about the first tanks or the first, the printing press or something like this. It's the same kinds of logics about how can people in power leverage that power and upon whom. So if it were an AI agent that had been trained on all of somebody in power, it would be the same problem, because it would still be techno-social always.
Who's better, AI or my president? Please don't post this on social media. I think a human being can be removed from power. And as it was said before, technologies allow us to distance ourselves from it. Like the algorithm seems almighty, and it seems like this unstoppable force, which I've noticed with ChatGPT, with the use of ChatGPT as this like omniscient ruler that decides in like personal fights, and like people seem to think that these things are God, basically. And I think we're still at the point where we think politicians are people, and people can be removed from power. It's hard. They can't be removed from power.
That was a question from...
Hello. Yeah, thank you for the panel. It was super interesting. Learned really a lot. I guess I have, kind of a question about like the future and like a what do we do question. We're living in the era of climate collapse, right? Like things are getting really, really bad really fast. And y'all mentioned, of course, like using AI and using all of this new tech is accelerating climate collapse, but also, of course, war is accelerating climate collapse to a massive degree. So on both sides, it's, really not good. So I'm kind of like past pessimism towards optimism that we will eventually have to stop the level at which we're using all of this because we are endangering ourselves as a species. I'm kind of wondering, like, how do we preempt that, and like what do we build next? I think like offline is, also agree a lot of stuff's going to go to offline as the internet just gets full of more and more garbage. But is there like another kind of option, or if we are going to go kind of offline in the future, how do we build that? That's it.
Maybe I can collect one more question so we can,
Thank you. I have a question related to your research, Sarah. Why do these companies like Palantir sell consumer tech? As I guess most people know that they are military tech, but why do they, and I guess why do people even buy this military tech?
Maybe then you can all say something about alternatives and what to build, and then Sarah will have you.
should I answer the second question first?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, if I were a company, I would be thinking very carefully about that decision, but I'm not sure. I believe they started the military branch first, but I don't actually know. I think it's interesting to me that they're able to make that adjustment so easily. And like things like supply chain or corporate human resources, healthcare, whole healthcare systems are based on Palantir, human resources management, things like this. Anything that you're managing a large company around, I think that they are just happy to make money where they can make money, and their whole corporate strategy has been about convincing Silicon Valley that being aligned with the military is no longer a bad thing, but is about going back to the roots of Silicon Valley and going back to the roots of America and nationalism. So their strategy is to put that forward as a feature, not a bug.
And I think I can say something about the offline, the detoxing, the alternatives. I mean, so it's quite tricky because I'm very much of two minds, where I'm like, on the one hand, we definitely can control, to some extent, the tools that we're using. We can make those choices. For example, instead of WhatsApp, using Signal, instead of Google using, I don't know, Postio or other tools, you know, depending on what you're using Google for, email or search. Or there are tons, as Rima mentioned, tons of great alternatives out there. But I guess the other side of two minds is exactly like you had mentioned, is that the onus of environmental and social catastrophe is not on us as people who are using these products. It is on these giant multi-billion or even trillion euro companies who are creating damaging systems, you know, that are built on exploitation and are like it's a mess. But with that said, I think there are some things that we can do. I think like one thing that I really try to practice step by step in my day-to-day is to really look at what are the digital tools that I need in order to resist, in order to organize, in order to you know, recharge, and then finding alternatives for those tools. So in my personal opinion, it doesn't have to be offline. It can be if you want to, you know, live on a remote island, like that's amazing, do it. But for those of us who feel like compelled to continue staying and organizing and fighting, I think there are ways that we can do it that go kind of around the bends. And there's a lot of toolkits written out there, a lot of guides written out there looking at these alternative systems, but maybe just finding like, you know, what is a certain tool that you really trust and kind of seeing who they recommend. That might be really helpful too. Like for example, Tor browser or Signal messaging app, like who else are they recommending in this space? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to like highlight also an initiative that exists around the world. There's a whole network of degrowth communities, and also the ideas that people are challenging what is considered success, what is considered progress in economy, and changing our consumerist habits. Like Safa, I guess in the second mind, I don't see like online inherently as something bad. It's just using being online in one way only, that is feeding into systems of surveillance and harm. I see that there was also before the previous question about, is this because we're talking about technology under capitalism? I see that in the very personal stories, and we talked a lot about here about big tech, of how these companies started,
it is in this interconnected fabric of oppressions. Who was able to start this company in this garage with a loan from a dad who had a diamond mine, who benefited from apartheid, and seeing this history continue to today's prevailing ideology of long-termism, and how it's connected to white supremacy. So I cannot really talk about an approach when it comes like to alternatives in tech that is just tech. I think it's part of a wider, as you said, intersectional movement that is fighting against all forms of exploitation.
We have a question from our audience online, and Christine will read that for us.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, you can. Great. The question is for Leah. What do you think communities in the global north can learn from digital resistance in the global south?
What I said before that I think what I said before about how these developments are not inevitable, that these promises are not necessarily true, that we have to critically look at what's being put in front of us as a solution to all of our problems, and to think, does this help me? Do I need it? Is it ruining my life in some way? I think that's some of the communities that reject Bitcoin the most are communities that are also being affected by the environmental cost of mining, Bitcoin mining, for example. Like, you can tell what they're doing to you, and then doing this connection is very important. So I guess that's it, but also just looking at how these things have developed is really important, because it's happening right now, right now and in the global north already. There are plans to build something like Prospera in Greenland, the so-called Freedom City. There was a couple of years ago, which you probably didn't hear about, but there was an attempt to build a private city in Sachsen, in the city of Döbeln. I say attempt because I haven't heard about it in a couple of years, so I'm guessing it doesn't exist anymore, but it's happening. So that is kind of like, look at the development, because it's going to be copied one-to-one over here. Yeah.
Thank you all so much for these excellent presentations. Thank you so much for the audience. We are out of time.
Thank you.
We should wait.
Also, a really big thank from my side. I think this was a very important panel to see the very different phases of techno-violence, from the virtual world to the Bitcoin, to what is happening in Gaza, what is happening in DC Congo, and what is happening in Central America. So we connect a lot of dots, and we will also go more in depth with Rima on Sunday at your workshop. So at the moment, actually, the workshop is completely fully booked, but you can register the waiting list. And also, Neil, thank you so much for the moderation. And I want to remind to come here in 20 minutes. There will be the keynote Secrecy, Surveillance and Grassroots Resistance with Terry Albury, that is a former FBI agent and whistleblower, and Lindsay Billing, an investigative journalist and photographer. So we will span from all the discourse of secrecy, state violence, from US until Afghanistan, with the discourse also of grassroots reporting of Lindsay Billing, that she is in Afghanistan at the moment. while the voice of terror is very important also to denounce forms of oppression, of racial profiling, and marginalized communities and dissidents and journalists. So I hope you all come back here. And also I want to remind that over there is the table of Untold magazine. They do a lot of great work about Gaza, about the SWANA region with great publications. There is also one about critical AI. So thank you so much again, and see you everyone in 20 minutes.